Just a few days ago, a YouTuber by the name of the Orthodox Muslim interviewed on a live stream none other than Rabbi Tovia Singer, sometimes also known as the Serpent of Southeast Asia. I don't know why they call him that. Don't ask me. Now, the interview could have been titled How to Slander Christians and Strawman Christianity, but there's nothing particularly unique about that. A Muslim apologist and an anti-Christian rabbi demonizing Christians and Christianity is nothing new and nothing particularly interesting. What is more interesting is that aside from Tovia Singer, an Orthodox Jew living in Israel, aligning himself with people that might not have the friendliest views towards him and other Jews, what's very interesting about this is that Tovia Singer, in his normal fashion, was perfectly willing to throw Judaism and Jews under the proverbial bus in his attempts at demonizing Christianity for the sake of his anti-Christian polemics. Now, Tovia Singer, as I've pointed out in other videos, does this all the time. But in this particular interview, the level to which he was willing to demean and defile Judaism for the sake of his polemics against Christianity was, to be frank, mind-blowing. Now, I do plan to do a live stream addressing more of the video down the line in the near future, but for the sake of this video, I actually want to address two comments by Rabbi Tovia Singer in this interview. One of which he actually demeans and contradicts standard Jewish ideas and practices, directly contradicting some of the great sages of Judaism and Jewish ideology. And in another comment, he actually mocks and demeans a practice that is widespread in the Jewish world for the sake of demeaning Christians. He was perfectly willing to throw Jews and Judaism under the bus completely for the sake of his polemics against Christianity. Now, we're going to get into that now. I'm going to address those two comments. If you haven't yet, please like the video, and if you do find value in my videos, please consider subscribing. And without further ado, let's get to these two comments. So again, the first one we're going to address is a Jewish custom that Tovia Singer is actually belittling here for the sake of his polemics. And then we're going to address what Tovia says about Christian beliefs and the Jewish take on that, which actually directly contradicts the mainstream Jewish view and some of the great sages of Judaism that Tovia Singer would appeal to for his other aspects of his ideology. So let's look at this first clip and address it.
The Tawhid that is so precious to the Jew and the Muslim. That's why in Christian thought, the Father can't forgive you unless you believe that Jesus died for your sins. And Paul says openly that there's one God and one mediator between God and man. That's the man Jesus Christ. And of course, you'd have Catholics, which is the majority of Christians in the world by far, who add in more mediators. Like you have to pray through Mary, venerate Mary, right, and the saints. So all those in-betweens are a disaster. Whereas in Judaism, God is merciful. His name is mercy.
This is really so exquisite.
So here we have Tovia talking about how Christianity concocted this idea of a mediator between man and God. And then he goes further to mock specifically Catholics who believe in veneration of saints and intercession of saints. Tovia, did you forget that the vast majority of Orthodox Jews today partake in this practice of asking for intercession of saints? That Jews around the world go to the grave sites of tzaddikim, of Jewish saints, to pray for intercession? I mean, on the Mount of Olives, there are tons of graves of tzaddikim, of Jewish saints, where people are going all the time to pray for intercession. You'd think you would know that, Tovia, considering you live right around the corner. Not only that, the Chabad movement has hundreds of thousands of visits a year, if not in the millions, of people going to visit the grave of the Rebbe, of Menachem Mendel Schneerson, asking for intercession. In fact, many people will leave a letter at his gravesite called a pan, which is a short for Pidyon Nefesh, literally meaning redemption of the soul. They will ask the Rebbe for intercession at his gravesite. And this is not something concocted by the modern Jewish world. This is a practice that dates back to rabbis of the first century, which you can see reference to in documents like the Talmud. Jews have always asked for intercession of saints. This is a Jewish practice that goes back at least to the first century. So Tovia, attempting to mock Christianity as a whole and then further demonize specifically Catholics, had no problem being so intellectually dishonest as to leave out that this is a mainstream Jewish practice, and he was perfectly willing to throw Judaism and Jews under the bus for the sake of his polemics against Christianity in this interview. Now, the second thing I want to address here is another comment by Tovia where he makes the assertion that from a Jewish perspective, Christianity is the worst form of idolatry that could be practiced. Worse than bowing to idols or sacrificing to idols. Christianity, in Tovia's view, he makes the claim, is the worst form of idolatry. Let's take a look at that clip.
Or is this reading of the text absolutely absurd?
I wish absurd would be adequate. There is no greater iniquity than to assign God a partner. You see, actually, the doctrine of the Trinity in Judaism is a partnership called a Shituf in Hebrew or shirk in Arabic, is actually the worst type, the most grotesque, the most promiscuous iteration of idolatry. It's much worse than what Hindus do in bowing down to an idol, a cow, or whatever what they do. It's much worse.
This is really so exquisite.
So in this clip, we've seen that Tovia Singer is saying that Christianity, according to Judaism, is the worst form of idolatry, that bowing and sacrificing to idols is less problematic than the idea of Christian doctrine. He's making the claim that the Trinity, or what he's calling here Shituf, the idea that God has a partnership, is actually considered by Judaism far worse than pagan idolatry. This is a blatant lie. It's literally the opposite of the Jewish view. The concept of Shituf, of attributing partners to God as a specific category, was specifically developed to separate people like Christians, according to Jewish thought obviously, from pagan idolaters. It is a lesser problem according to Judaism. The reason this was done was to allow for Jews to engage in trade and business with Christians where they would not be allowed to with pagan idolaters. This category was specifically developed to allow Jews to understand that Christianity is not as far a departure from Jewish belief as pagan idolatry. That's what this category is for. Tovia Singer has flipped it, and he's pretending like this is a worse form of idolatry according to Jewish thought, which is a blatant lie. Rabbi Moshe Isserlis, the Rema, would disagree heavily with Tovia Singer, which is interesting considering that Tovia Singer probably gets much of his halachic legal Jewish practices from the Rema. I'd have to guess, considering he's an Ashkenazi Jew. Now, this is a distortion of Jewish beliefs. This is Tovia Singer, for the sake of his hatred against Christianity, willing to demonize Jews and willing to contradict some of the most prominent figures in Jewish authority, some of the greatest sages in Judaism. He is willing to claim that intercession of saints is a Christian idea that is contrary to Judaism, when it is obviously a practice in mainstream Judaism that dates back to at least the first century. He is willing to demonize and throw Jews under the bus for the sake of his polemics against Christianity. And this should give you an indication that this is not about defending Judaism. This is about attacking Christianity. Tovia Singer claims he's an anti-missionary, but his entire platform is designed to tear Christians away from Christian faith. He's a two-faced snake. Nothing he does is genuine or honest. This is about polemics against Christianity, even at the cost of Judaism. He's willing to contradict the Jewish sages and Jewish halachic authorities to make a point on this live stream with this Muslim YouTuber, willing to demonize the sages of Judaism and Jewish people and Judaic ideology for the sake of his attacks on Christianity. Tovia Singer, you've done it again. You've managed to undermine all of Judaism for your attacks against Christians. If you are a Jewish person watching this you should be praying for the end of Tovia Singer's polemics career, because he is willing to defile Jewish tradition and culture for the sake of his attacks on other people.